All right, we're live and we're back in the studio. Um, I'm taking control this time around. Sit back, Austin. Relax. You're in good hands. We're going to talk a little bit about where we've been career wise in a recent career history and then kind of a little bit where we're at and where we're going.
Love
Sound
it.
good?
Yeah, man.
All right,
Dude, I think that's great.
Austin, I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about fly bodies. So, a little bit about kind of like origin, recent history stuff. And I know a little bit about the story. You posted some stuff on the Fly Bodies channel, kind of like along your journey. But I'm interested to hear from you, like what kind of trade offs did you make when you started Fly Bodies up, and then like keeping it going like along the way or just like in the beginning. Let's hear about the trade offs.
Cool. So, just to clarify, do you want me to give any background on fly bodies or just go straight into the trade-offs?
What's your 30-second elevator pitch? Do you got that nailed?
Dude, I can try. We're at 107. I'll give it 30 seconds. So, fly body started out with me helping my younger brother lose 75 pounds from California and North Carolina. He was living in North Carolina. I was living in California. Helped him lose 75 pounds over like a year. And when he came back to our hometown, everybody was like, dude, what'd you do? He was like, I worked with Austin. And so then we started working with a couple people there. It turned into us working with a lot of faculty and staff in my hometown. And then I asked a private school out here in California if they would want to do something for their faculty and staff. The guy was like, hey, let's give it a shot. And then now here we are. Now we're actually working with schools, with faculty and staff, and alumni engagement folks to put wellness out into the world a little more. So that is the 5-year journey in 30 seconds. I'm proud of myself, hopefully, for giving that. And then to talk about trade-offs, man, it's interesting when you look back because in the time when you're doing it, a lot of things that you're doing, you don't realize like how crappy your life is, but also what you're, looking back, you're like kind of proud that you did that in order to kind of get where you are. And I'm not saying like fly bodies is nowhere near where I want it to be, but we're doing well. But when I look back at the first year that we did fly bodies, I signed a contract with the private school in 2022 for $15,000 for 4 months of work. Funny aside to that is another wellness guru signed a $50,000 contract with the same private school for 1.5 months of work. And so it was just like interesting because when you talk about trade-offs, it's like, okay, I was living with my brother in a 1-bedroom apartment with a dog. And this dog was a Siberian Husky. So if you can imagine, there's fur everywhere in this 1-bedroom apartment. My brother is sleeping in the dining room area and I'm sleeping in the 1 bedroom. And the dog is just doing whatever it wants to do. And so when we talk about trade-offs, it's like, I even heard the iced coffee house guy talk about it. He still lives with 4 people in his current state and what he's doing. And it's like, oh, dude,
What's the iced coffee house?
you have a really, sorry, Iced Coffee House podcast. It's a really big podcast. And they have thousands, if not millions of subscribers or viewers. And they're making really good money. I think from what I've heard, they're making really good money. And he's still living with 4 other dudes in Vegas in a house. And so I think to begin with, the trade-off that you have to make, or at least that I did without taking any funding, because that was something I decided to do, was you kind of have to lower your level of living a little bit if you're starting from like, where I was starting. No one has to do that, but I didn't want to. I wanted to live as minimally as possible so that I didn't have to compromise any decisions I made to build fly bodies, right? So
Dude,
like,
that's just like a straight up tie back to the financial advice episode, not advice, information episode that we were talking about last time. It's like imagine personal income where you got like a W-2 or you're making contract money, and we talk about wants and needs and kind of like that lifestyle creep. It's even more important with a startup. Like if you're responsible for that, that seems like your burn, your personal burn is, kind of directly translates into the business itself. And like you said, you
100%.
didn't want to have to make any sacrifices or think, well, I have to seek out something, more revenue over here. You have to make, oh, this is going to bring in a ton of money, so I got to do this, even if it's off track of your vision, especially if you're bootstrapping it. So it seems like, you're living it out. You're living out the best kind of advice.
Well, so, and two, like, exactly. Like, I made a spreadsheet that was like, what's the least amount of money that I need to make in order to live my life right now? And it's not like, obviously, I didn't want, all the money that I'm making with the business, I'm trying to put back into the business or just use to live. Like, and so I remember, like, I read a spreadsheet and I was like, it was like $35,000. And I know that sounds like very, very low, but like when I was sharing a 1-bedroom with my brother, because usually your housing expense is probably one of your biggest expenses. I got it down so well that I was like, okay, if I just made $35,000, I can be able to continue with Fly Bodies forever. Like in my current state, obviously living with my wife, now there is no way that I could live off of $35,000. I could make it happen if I needed to, but not really. Anyways, but in that current state, you go, what's the minimal amount of money that I need to make in order to just survive? And we've talked about this before. It's like, at the end of the day, it's just about staying in the game. It's that infinite game that Simon Sinek talks about. It's like, how can I just stay alive so that I can just continue to adapt so that at some point I can figure out what is my biggest revenue generating thing that I really want to make. So I think that's the biggest trade-off that I made in the beginning was I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with my brother and it cost each of us probably $1,000 to live there with a dog. And it's just like, okay, that's the biggest trade-off is a lot of people don't want to take that because I was living pretty lavishly with another group of guys on like in Hermosa Beach, right? Like 2 blocks from the ocean. I moved to Torrance and it was not in the best place, which I'll tell you really quick. I remember one night I woke up and there were cops outside with their guns drawn at a corner right outside my window going to another apartment. That's kind of the area we were in. And it was just one of those things where I was just like, oh my gosh, like, and they like knocked on this door, went inside, blah, blah, blah. But that's a whole other thing. So it's like the trade-off, if you're just now starting out, it's okay to live like really below your means or like somewhere where you maybe not had gone before. And that's the trade-off I think that I had to really kind of do, but I was okay with it because I was like, oh, I'm with my brother, and hopefully one day we'll tell this story, years down the road and say, this was worth it, right? And so that was the biggest trade-off to begin with.
It's worth it because you've survived until this point. So you made some trade-offs early on, but like ongoing to keep it going, like what were some of the other trade-offs that you made?
I think I ended up, one of the other trade-offs I made was I would take on side things, side hustles in order to, when I wasn't bringing in enough money from Fly Bodies, through that first school that I was working with. So they would ask me, hey, I still distinctly remember this. Did you ever play lacrosse? And I was like, no. And they were like, it's okay. Would you mind coaching the middle school girls lacrosse team? and they were like, we can pay you, $25 an hour. And I was like, man, like, I need more money right now. So that was like a trade-off where I was like, okay, 3 days a week, 2 hours a day, I'm making this much money. It'll help me bring in a little more money so that I can live and keep this thing going. So like that was a trade-off, right? And it's just like, I wasn't spending 3 or 4 hours a day doing this thing. It was an amount of time where I felt like it was a trade-off where I could, make money while I wasn't completely taking away from my time of doing Fly Bodies. So like that was something where being able to do a little side hustle to help yourself sustain what you're trying to inevitably do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I'd love to hear, kind of like you get signed to this contract with a private school, you're coaching middle school girls lacrosse. Like, how did it play out between you and the other fitness specialist?
So actually so kind of an interesting story to begin with was the head of school actually told me no to begin with. He said, we're going to go with this other wellness professional. And I was like, dude, I gave you the idea and now you're going to go with somebody else. What the heck?
Shop it around to somebody else.
Yeah. And they were going to give it to somebody else. But then I emailed him back and I said, hey, can we do these in tandem? Because I've heard that this other wellness professional is all remote. She's all via Zoom. And he goes, yeah, let's actually do that and see which one, what they like from each one. turns out that all her stuff was remote and they liked all the in-person stuff and someone that was there that they could ask questions anytime, do workouts and all this other stuff. So they ended up only doing her program for one semester. And then I'm still there after, 4 years. And so that was interesting because, I was actually trying to do more things with the school to kind of gain that trust and that ability to say like, hey, I'm willing to do these other things around the school in order to pursue this wellness program that we're providing for you. So to answer your question is anything I would say in today's world, especially after COVID, anything in person definitely has a bigger effect and more profound impact on the people you're working with. And so that was something that I actually tried to play up.
Yeah. Was that like that in-person stuff, like the comparison thing seems like it makes a lot of sense. Like that's why you want to, at the end of the day. Were there any other catalysts that like kind of help drive momentum or success for Fly Bodies?
So I think I look at basically the first contract that we ever got was, so let me go back. So relationships are very important. And I didn't realize relationships were very important until maybe after playing Air Force rugby. But also,
spoiler alert.
It's true though. Like, because in the back of my mind, I always thought the best person will win out. If this guy's a 9 out of 10 and this guy is a 7 out of 10, the 9 out of 10 guy will work. But that doesn't happen in real life. In real life, the 7 out of 10 guy may have a really good relationship with the boss.
Connection to the board.
Boom, boom. And so that's where it really, and you shouldn't like just try to be friends with people just to get what you want. You should, want to be friends with them if they're good people. But that's one thing I realized is networking is actually a great skill. And so the one thing I'll say about that is one of the football players' moms is a really good friend of mine and my brother now. And she knew that I was trying to do Fly Bodies, take it to where I really wanted to take it. And she goes, hey, you should do this incubator called Bunker Labs. And I was like, okay, I've never heard about it. And I've never really thought about doing an incubator because I didn't want it to take away, or I'd heard of like YC, but like Bunker Labs was actually for military folks or military spouses. And so I looked into it, I applied and didn't get in the first time, but I got in the second time. And the reason why I'm telling this story is because one, having the relationship with that mother actually got me into Bunker Labs. And then when I did Bunker Labs, I'll tell this story afterwards, but my first actual customer was from Bunker Labs. And it was a connection that I made within Bunker Labs. And this guy, said, oh, Austin, I want to give you a shot. I know this person that works for LA County, and they could probably use some of your wellness for their office. And I was like, awesome. And it was like a $3,000 contract for like 3 months or something like that. Anyways, the reason why I say that was the catalyst is because I was able to use that one customer to even say that, hey, I'm working with this company to try to get into Chadwick as well. Hey, we're working with LA County. And the reason why networking is so important, and I'll say this is kind of a juicy story, but one of the members of the incubator got really, really pissed off because the teacher for our group basically introduced this woman to an investor, and the investor was like, hey, I'm not interested in your company. Sorry, I pass. And then this teacher brought the investor to one of our groups and talked to the group and said, hey, everyone give me your, 2-minute elevator pitch and I'll tell you what you did well, what you did. And this woman said, no, I'm good. I'm not going to give you my elevator pitch. We're good. And it was very kind of like passive aggressive. Yeah. And so when this investor guy got off the phone, she goes, Daryl, I can't believe you brought this guy on after how disrespectful he was to me. And I'm very, very upset that after, I had a bad interaction with him and then I told you about it and you still brought him on, you would still bring him on. Fast forward, I had to be a witness to this blow up from this lady. And the instructor is the one who introduced me to the customer because he was like, Austin, you seem like a level-headed guy and you had my back. Let me introduce you to this guy in LA County. Boom.
Let's talk about ways to do this right with best practices, and then maybe ways to do this wrong. Like you talk about networking, it's all about social trust, right? So social proof, social trust. So you know somebody, and so that warm relationship allows you to have the conversation. You talked about the kind of, hey, meritocracy of 9 out of 10 versus 7 out of 10 performance. Well, the social stuff gets you in the door, and then you prove it with your quality. So it's both. It's yes and. In your case, you trusted the process, you got the intro, you applied to Bunker Labs, you got in, you got the intro, you got that first customer. In the case of this other person, they were involved in Bunker Labs. They tried to pitch this investor. This investor came back to the class for the benefit of the class, I assume, right, to kind of get some feedback. A learning moment for this person might have been, I'm going to repitch this person and see what they say. Maybe this investor doesn't even remember me.
Probably not.
Just pitch them again. Did you do better this time? Is your idea more well crafted? Sure, you sit out, but I feel like that's just like a wasted opportunity. And then burning the bridges between you and that investor, anybody that investor knows maybe, and the instructor, the teacher for Bunker Labs, that could have made other connections. Maybe this investor was a bad fit. Who knows? I actually don't know the context, and that's fine, right? You can have to, have, dozens and dozens of calls to kind of find the right person. But then maybe they were a good fit, and you could have tried again. Or the teacher has other people in their network. So don't burn the social capital that is like so hard to build up.
So true. That I can't harp on that enough. I think that statement alone is just, it's like, you never, like, there's no, unless somebody like spits in your face, like directly, like, or does something like, wrongs you somehow, like runs over your car. I don't know. Like, it's always in your best interest just to be nice and to be the person that it's like in control of your emotions and that type of thing. Because like you said, you never want to burn a bridge. That is something where you're like, hey, I'm just putting out there in the world what I want. And if somebody doesn't want it, that's okay. That's all right. And it's like just being nice. You can be that person that always is like, oh, I was nice. I did what I needed to do. That my intent was good. And yeah, you never know what can happen from there. So that's a little bit about fly bodies. That's kind of like the beginning journey. And I think the takeaway for me with those trade-offs is sometimes you have to, go below what you actually were at from a living standpoint. You have to be willing to say, I'm going to make some trade-offs to live the life I want to in order to get this bigger goal or try out this thing. Right. And then also the networking piece, just always be nice and always be open to seeing what somebody else needs help with or wants, and just be a nice person at the end of the day. Right. You never know what can open the door from that. But
absolutely.
I want to now shift gears. So we talked about a little bit about fly bodies and how we started in the trade-offs. Now I want to talk about Harvard MBA, Harvard. And I want to know from you, the first question is, going into Harvard, what were you expecting? And then leaving Harvard, what did you want to get out of Harvard, the MBA program going in? And then leaving, what do you think you got out of it? Like the two different, if those didn't line up.
Yeah, no, I definitely, my perspective shifted pretty dramatically over my time at Harvard. Even just like here's a fun story. So day one, we show up to this program called START. So START is 3 days of programming to kind of get you oriented to the program. They can't call it orientation because Harvard always has unique branding on everything. We meet our section mates. So at Harvard, you have a class of 900, and then in your section, that's like 90 people that you are going to spend the whole first year with. We sit down in an auditorium, and I'm sitting in a row with people. We all have our t-shirts on that are matching for our section, and the speaker on stage says, hey, turn to somebody next to you and tell them why you're coming to Harvard, to get Harvard Business School, to get an MBA. And I turned to this guy, Mosin, and I said, to build generational wealth.
Let's go.
This is like the Harvard MBA or top MBA is a trajectory shift, right? So you can either take it from, in my case, the military background, and you're able to access a network of people that you didn't have access before. People will take your call. simply because they also graduated. So that's within the network. But then also there's this branding, kind of like on your resume, you could say, hey, I'm a Harvard MBA. People will consider you. Not that
Dude,
they'll
they'll
take
take your
you.
phone call. Yes, 100%.
They'll take your
They'll be
phone
like,
call.
okay, why is this guy calling?
Right. And so I'm thinking, this is my ticket to the next level. So I tell this
Okay.
to Mosin. I kind of cringe whenever I think about that, because even like this is just a couple months ago in the hallway. I hadn't seen Mosin in a couple months, and we're catching up. Hey man, like good luck in your next steps. And he's like, yeah, I remember, when we sat down, that first day in Claremont Hall, you turned to me and you said, I'm gonna build. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna build wealth. And he's like, no, you said generational wealth. And I was like, oh gosh, like
No
for
big deal.
me, I think that's still possible. I have changed my perspective on kind of like what's worth chasing after, right? Not
Okay.
putting money first, like that David Senra kind of lesson from history is help others. The money will come. You just sort of focus on serving others. And so I've definitely I come from a position of privilege here to say I don't have to focus on that. That's not my main focus, is the money side, but I actually think that it's just more freeing to kind of focus on the mission side, or kind of what your value you're producing in the world. So it's funny, you go in and you meet a bunch of people that are on the path, as I call it. So all of the people at HBS, they are out of the population. There's a normal curve. Everyone, there's people of all different backgrounds, lots of international students, but it is a select group, and what they're selecting for is ambition. I think that's what the MBA program, at least at Harvard Business School, is selecting for: ambition. People who kind of want to go. The tagline is, creating leaders who will change the world through business. I think is like the HBS tagline, and they're serious about changing the world, right? So that's like monumental companies all over the world, new technologies, all sorts of things, and it's a leadership program. That's another perspective shift. Is that I thought I was going to get equipped to be like, here is the skills that you're going to learn, and you're going to go out and get a job. And really what it is, it's a perspective shifting experience to say, here are all the opportunities that are out there. It's a language program to learn the language of business. Here are things that I never even considered. I was trying on different career hats. I thought I was going to go do entrepreneurship through acquisition, or ETA, raise some money from investors, go out and find a private business from somebody who's retiring, buy it from them, and then run it, and maybe have an exit in some number of years. What I realized is the big perspective shift. Like, I don't know if I've talked to you about kind of the big brain, small brain meme, where it's like a bell curve,
Right.
and you
Yeah, yeah,
have
yeah.
on one end it's just like pretty simple thinking, on the other end it's like super advanced thinking, and in the middle it's the mean of the population, and on the low end it's like, hey, do what you find interesting. And on the right end it's just do what you find interesting.
Do what you find interesting.
But in the middle it's like, well, what industries are taking off, and where can I position myself, and what are the skills, and I'm going to think about my 5-year plan, and this is how I'm going to make it. And all of that middle stuff just it just confused me a lot,
Mm-hmm.
because I was feeling a lot of FOMO. That's one of the biggest things at a place like HBS is you're in a space where on any given day you have your calendar in the afternoons especially is triple booked. Every day, social stuff, clubs, you have speakers coming into town, and you're thinking, where should I be right now? Where should I be right now? The most advantageous place for me to be right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I ran into a guy in the hallway. It's 4:30. I'm walking back to my house because I'm gonna hang out with my family and walk my dog. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to this. There's a PE firm that was coming into town to give a talk on internships in my first year. Dozens of them come through, all different companies." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm going to this thing, this capital," and I hadn't even heard of that. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go do PE this next summer." And I was like, "Should I go do PE? Should I be doing that?" It's one of these things that like it's so confusing. Now, after some analysis, definitely not a great fit for me. and I'm really glad that I ended up where I ended up at. More of like a simplification of the world. Not that the world is simple or straightforward, but it's kind of like being finding good fit, what I find interesting, and then just hammering that.
Yeah. No, and okay. So that's super interesting because obviously your starting base of I want to build generational wealth, which made me think, what is wealth, right? Like wealth could be a bunch of different things, right? It doesn't have to be money. Obviously, I think you are like just by going to Harvard, and we talked about this, is like you have that on your nameplate now, or in your resume, and so like that is building some type of like wealth, right?
That's right. So it's going to result. This is going to work out well for me. For on average, it works out really well for a lot of people. I feel very, very grateful for the opportunity. Some time to reflect. I'm on the road now. You can see I'm in a different background. I'm on the road, moving to Raleigh with my family, and wealth can look like a lot of different things. For a lot of people that are on the path, you come from consulting or banking or private equity, and then you go in and you re-recruit for some other adjacent field, and you're trying to move up the ladder. And this is just like a waypoint. And you're going to move to San Francisco or New York primarily, and you're going to work a super high paying job for 80 plus hours a week minimum, and you're going to make great money. If you join a booming startup, then you might get some equity, and that could play into it. And there's a lot of things that are trade-offs in that as well. So I talked about the work hours. Well, you're making a lot of money, but can you even enjoy that? Can you even hear yourself think? Do you have time to reflect? What does your work environment actually look like?
Do you have a family? You have kids?
Do you have a family? And so a lot of people, for me, I'm married and I have a kid, so I was in like the 10% starting out. It's about 10% have families when they show up for the class. And so my calculus was just different. You might be making great money and you live in New York. So did you just kind of like all of your living expenses just kind of met where you're at? So that starting pay for, a consulting job with McKinsey or Bain or BCG sounds great. And then you live in New York. A buddy of mine, Pat, is moving down to BCG Raleigh. Well, the starting pay for everybody across the board at all places at BCG is the same. So that base salary that you make in New York doesn't go as far as that base salary if you're living in Raleigh. So there's a lot of things for me about these trade-offs. So, there's geographic arbitrage you can play. The job markets are different, so I'm not going to pretend like you can work any job from anywhere. And if you want to get involved in a startup in person, working at 996 in the Bay, you got to go to San Francisco, right? That's kind of the way that it is. So I was a little deluded that I wanted to eat my cake and have it too at some point, but I got very comfortable with creating a rich life that involved all facets for me. So that includes family, autonomy over my time to some extent, so that I could choose what I wanted to work on, when I wanted to work on it, and then having that space to kind of not go into a work coma for 3 or 4 years and then wake up and my daughter is now in grade school and doesn't know who I am.
For sure. So when most people, going back to that first thing, is like when you talk about building generational wealth, most people think like, hey, this person wants to make a lot of money, right? And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's usually like, I think that's usually everyone's first thought is like, when you talk about generational wealth, that's awesome. But you have a lot of other variables that you took into account. You're married, you have a kid, you have to take their wants and needs into account. And so you're like, okay, how can I still make a good salary, but also not completely forget about them in the process, and also build that wealth with them, right? Like a happy family I would say, is probably a wealthy person has a healthy family, right?
And if you're talking about just like, no, some people wouldn't say that. And that's not, hey, everyone's got their own different perspectives on kind of what they think is important in life. I know that there's a lot of just from my own personal experience, and then the research about like family relationships, social relationships being really, really good for your health. And so I prioritize the time. So it's good for my wife, it's good for my daughter, it's good for me. And that's just the way that I plan to live my life.
Cool. So, so I think it's kind of interesting how at Harvard, basically, you almost have paradox of choice, it sounds like, where you have so many options of like, there's the women in the red dresses, Alex Hormozy would say, everywhere. Like you are just a kid in a candy store when it comes to the amount of things that you can do. And so that's probably a little overwhelming because obviously being a researcher and what was your degree at the academy?
Ops research analyst.
Data scientist?
Operations research,
so, yeah, operations research. You're always trying to optimize things. So internally, I feel like that's a big struggle for you, also for myself, because we're always trying to make that next optimized move that's going to put us in the best situation possible. But at the end of the day, you can't control all variables and you can only do so much. So those paradox of choice, having unlimited options can be a little overwhelming, especially if you're like, with the paradox of choice, you're like, if there are 100 different choices I can make, there's got to be one that's perfect for me. And I think for you, you even tried out. I'd love to hear a little bit about the summer internship you did with a startup, if you don't mind telling a bit about that story and what you learned, why you did it, and what you learned from them, and why you didn't go down that route.
Yeah, so I did an internship this summer as a product management intern in a startup doing mental performance training with athletes. So using an AI platform to build kind of like not a therapist level, not a therapeutic level, because that's like more medical grade, but this is more like performance coaches in sport work on all of the stuff up here that helps you do your best. And the idea and the end market was really fascinating, still is to me. And I went in thinking, okay, I'm going to get an experience seeing, let me pause there. Going into the summer, I talked to a lot of people that were kind of trying to confirm some things. They're trying to say, oh, I kind of want to do this, and so I want to see what it's like. For me, I was actually looking for kind of evidence that would exclude stuff.
Interesting.
Meaning that's more information. If you can exclude something, that is actually more information from like an information theory perspective to say, actually, this thing, not for me, boom, you can completely scrub it off, and now your paradox of choice actually shrinks. So there's a couple things. Was I had a sense that I wanted to work in a startup environment, and that is a true test to be like, this is the building stages. This one was fully remote. So could I do this fully remote? I had this sense, I need to be social. I don't think this is going to work. This opportunity was one of the only that I was able to manifest in Boston. So I was able to stay in Boston, which is important for me and my family. And then there's a sense of like, hey, product management is this category of work in technical companies that I think I'm well suited to, that people have kind of talked about. Is this something that I would like, or can I rule it out? And that summer, I went in and I realized startups are wild and crazy and super messy. I had my job jar, and people had some roles defined, and you kind of like lean into other things. But what I realized is that they need a lot more help operationally. And so I talked to the CEO to say, hey, I would like to step into more of a chief of staff role for you and for the company to kind of run internal stuff and still do some product stuff development, because that's the main thing. Develop the product, sell the product. That's basically all you need to be doing at the early stage of a company. And so I jumped into that role, and what I realized is I love that environment. I love the speed and the pace and how dynamic things were, the feedback loop of you do something, and then immediately you're going to find out whether or not that was something good. Versus, there's other places in the workforce, sometimes in the Air Force, where you're part of this massive machine, and if you do something, you might not see the benefit of that far down the road. I don't think all
Dude, you work on a satellite program that takes 15 years to build the first satellite,
and you're going to be there for 3 years as one of a team of 40 people, for example. Um,
Exactly.
what I realized why I didn't go forward with it is a few things internally. I have a way higher bar for who I want to work with. And that's not from an elitist perspective. That's more of a, it takes just as much work to work, maybe more, to work with people that are able to execute a vision than it is like the people that can't execute the vision versus people that can. And
It's like
so
that. It's like
being in
that
the room
curve.
with kind
It's
of,
the curve. It sounds like.
that's right. So um, that's another thing. It's like refinement of accompaniment. It's like it's where working your way into circles where it's, I am not the smartest person in the room. Not saying that I was at this startup, but it's like if I feel very comfortable that I'm, you know, the somebody leading the way, or I understand everything that needs to happen here, I'm not in a place of growth. And so there was some dysfunction there that's normal with the startup. For me, I don't know if they have the right team in place. I hope that, they're able to figure it out. And then another thing was kind of like a role fit what I was going to do on a day-to-day basis. I wasn't really confident that that's what I wanted to do.
For sure.
And so the confirmatory stuff was awesome, and I carried that forward to kind of this next role. But the stuff that made me reject it or kind of say, hey, I'm going to move in a different direction was super helpful as well.
That's awesome. And I feel like, dipping your toes into that area to, like you said, kind of exclude something where you're like, okay, I don't want to be necessarily in this area with these people. But that's interesting. I had in that same vein, I went and worked for Body Spec right out of the Air Force. And to your point, like it was very much still a startup. It was only like 3 or 4 years old. And the person in charge was very competent, very smart, very like, hey, I know what we're doing here. But I just didn't. I didn't like the direction they were going as a company, because I wanted to help in a different way, right? Like I wanted to help the world and fix another problem in a different way. And so it's interesting because what you're saying with the company you work for, you're like, I don't know if I would have been able to work with these people. Like they weren't on the same level. It's interesting, like how you have different reasons for not wanting to work with a specific company, right? And I just find that interesting because it's just like, oh, like and it might be one day you do a startup and you do it the way you want it. And now you are working for a company that is very, very, it seems like very high level, as in the problem you're working on and the people you're going to work with are top notch. And it's like being around those people are going to make you better every day, every week. And it's going to like elevate your game. Is that fair to say?
Right. That's right. No, it's still not publicly announced yet, so we'll get into it. I know I keep kind of like every week this comes up. We'll talk about it eventually. What I will say is Arthur Brooks, Dr. Arthur Brooks, it was a professor at Harvard Business School, Harvard Kennedy School. He talks about this big decision making framework where if you're going to go into something, you should feel 80% excitement, 20% fear, and 0% dread. 80% excitement is, oh, I like this thing. It energizes me. There's a lot, there's different factors that go into that. 20% fear is, ooh, this might test me a little bit. I don't know if I have everything that it takes. There's a stretch there. And then the dread piece, there's always a piece of work that makes you feel dead. Or sorry, I should say, my buddy William would say, every job has its own crap sandwich. You just have to determine what flavor you're willing to stomach. That's different than dread. Dread is I'm getting really bad Sunday scaries, and I just feel like some deadness of my soul in this.
Yeah.
If that is
like,
involved at all, that's
here?
just going to
Like,
fester
why am I
and rot.
here?
That is going to fester and rot. So I'm not saying run away if you have difficulty. That's different than this kind of existential, like it's an intuition thing that's hard for me to describe. And in this next opportunity, great team, fantastic opportunity, super excited about the space and what I'm going to be able to do. Ton of ownership, autonomy on my time, remote work that fits with my family's schedule and our plan. And it's also a stretch. There's some of it that for me is just like, ooh, actually I'm gonna need to step up my game to be able to match the expectations that these people that are fantastic have for me, and a ton of growth. So that's kind
Dude,
of
that's
like where
awesome.
I'm at heading into.
Yeah. And dude, you're keeping us on pins and needles. I can't wait to hear what this job is.
Yeah,
But
man. Well,
eventually.
yeah, that's right. So, no, I appreciate you digging into it. I'm sure we'll get into more of like kind of like where we're at now, and kind of like looking forward in a future episode. But I think that's pretty good for the pod.
Yeah. I think we dove in. We got to know each other a little bit, our little histories. Yeah, I love it. Sounding good.